Welcome to Transforming with Us,
where we talk about
all things trans and queer.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us with Transforming with Drew, where we talk about everything LGBTQIA and more. And today we have Dominic with us. And Dominic, would you care to introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dominic Lauren. I use any pronouns, so feel free to use any pronouns with me when speaking with me as well. And I'm excited to be here. Thanks for asking me to come on.
Oh, thank you for being here. We definitely appreciate it. And I want to apologize to everybody. I am a little bit under the weather, but I definitely did not want to miss this opportunity with Dominic. So, Dominic, would you like to tell us when it all began? Like what as the beginning of your journey has been like for you and where you are now?
Yeah, I have always felt very masculine as a child, and I was pretty quickly put into boxes of how I was supposed to act because I was assigned female at birth. And I struggled with that from as young as I can remember, even before I had the words what transgender was. I was calling myself a tomboy. People were throwing me skirts and dresses, and I did not want to wear that. And that was the first kind of indication to me that there was some sort of binary that I had to fit in. And it wasn't that I wanted to necessarily fit in it. It was that everyone around me was telling me to be perceived or received in society properly, I had to do X, Y, and Z. So, for instance, it was always a battle for me. I had to really try to find ways to express myself, but also to stay safe as a child because I did not have supportive parents that allowed me to fully express to the extent that I wanted to my own sense of self, whether that be wanting to buy clothes from the boys section as a young child or cut my hair really, really short like a boy, quote unquote. I was never allowed to do that. So I felt that really made me aware of, oh, there's something different with me. Why is it so difficult for me to try to fit into this box that everyone else seems so easily like to fit in with?
Yeah.
Like, why am I struggling with this? So when I was about 7, I asked my mom what she would have named me if I was born a boy, and she said Dominic. And I really liked that name since I heard it. So I started going by the name of Dominic at the age of 7. And I say that that's when I really truly knew, because I didn't have any access to the internet or anyone around me who was modeling this to me. It was very innate. It was very deep within my soul, this desire to express my masculinity, because society was totally acceptable of me accepting any ounce of femininity. So for me to want to really claim that more, I wanted to go by Dominic, and I wanted to see how that would make me feel as a 7-year-old. And I would tell people that I was a tomboy instead of a girl or a boy. So that was my own way of kind of indicating to people, like, I don't feel comfortable in either binary box. This is the best way to address me as a tomboy and as Dominic. Except most people when I was younger didn't call me Dominic. It was just my friends. A lot of people just thought it was kind of some cute fantasy play as a child. So I would do that at school with friends, but majority of the time people were calling me Lauren, which is my birth name, which I actually worked to reclaim for myself, which is why I now go by Dominic Lauren, because I feel that it's a very good representation of the equal parts of masculine and feminine that I feel I personally hold as an individual. And just through my own transition journey as I got older, I really found myself at certain moments suppressing every ounce of femininity, and then feeling very dysphoric at how masculine I had once become, and wanting to kind of step back from that and see where I could find a good balance for myself. And I used the term transgender for the first time when I was 14 years old, when I first learned what the term was, and I started to tell people that I was a transgender male. And I used that term for a very long time. It wasn't until I was about 22 that I started to really question if that was the right term for me, because growing up in that time period, it was about 2010 when I came out as a transgender male. And prior to that, I had come out as bisexual. I thought I was a lesbian for a little bit, but then I realized I was someone who doesn't have genital preference and or a preference for someone based off of their gender identity. It's just if I vibe with your energy, you vibe with me, and I find you attractive that way. It's queer, pansexual, bisexual. I really struggle with labels. So I try to just preface that I acknowledged that at the beginning. And then as I got older, trans was also something that I felt was also accurate as well. And I faced a lot of pushback, discrimination, bullying when I came out, just because at that time there was a very small transgender community online, but no active visibility within the mainstream media. So no one around me knew what transgender was. I didn't meet a real life transgender person outside of the internet for about 4 years while I was utilizing the term transgender. So while I was in high school, it was just me kind of existing in my own world, utilizing the term as best as possible to communicate to people an internal feeling that I was having. And my high school was also an all-girls Catholic school. So I ran into,
sorry.
yeah, I ran into a lot of interesting situations being in that position.
I'm sorry.
It didn't help either that it was only all girls in the high school. The rest of the school was co-ed. So everyone thought that I was a middle school boy out of uniform because I, for lack of a better term, passed as a boy the minute I cut my hair when I was younger without having to do any sort of hormonal intervention. So everyone just always thought that I was a middle school boy out of uniform because they had to wear uniform and we didn't for some reason in the high school. At that time, the high school was transitioning from being all girls to co-ed and Catholic to non-denominational, just spiritual. I like to say that I was a catalyst for that, but I don't know how much of that is actually true. So that's a very long-winded kind of also short synopsis of my transition story. I've been out as trans now for over a decade. I'm 25 now, so it's been a long journey to get me here, but I feel the most grounded and concrete in my sense of self than I ever have been.
And I know that a lot of people don't tend to understand how some people will go on hormones and they'll stop hormones and then they'll go back on hormones and they're like, well, what is the whole process of that? And I'm like, I kind of got to sit there and be like, you got to imagine what we're going through. We're going through another puberty essentially, which means a lot of emotions, a lot of pushback, and there's a lot of medical changes. And sometimes you have to kind of take a step back. And I appreciate when people do that when they're talking about like going through some of the things. Like I also know there's people who I do know some people who have these transitions because they were with, their incorrect therapist who pushed it on them and didn't do therapy properly. Like there's so many things that go into being transgender. When it came to your process and you being open about everything that you're doing, what made you decide to do your therapy, if that's something you were open to talking about?
Yeah, I'm very open to talking about that because I was someone who I didn't feel was given proper medical care in regards to my transition, because in the beginning, I found out about transitioning at a young age, but in finding out about that, I found out that testosterone replacement therapy was an actual thing that I could do. Right. So that was kind of the catalyst for, I can actually do something about feeling like I want to look like a boy or look like a man. Those were the words that I had at the time. And so I was given constant pushback by my parents and just the community around me. So I was told a lot of really hurtful things, a lot of really rude and mean things were said to me, which I now realize was coming from a place of concern and love from the individuals at their own understanding of what I was asking for. But unfortunately, the execution of their wanting to protect me actually harmed me more because I started to really pull back and got depressed. I suffered with a lot of self-harming tendencies. And I also suffered with wanting to unalive myself a lot. Suicidal ideation was a big thing for me at a very young age. And I didn't talk to anyone about it because I could almost see 5 steps ahead. if I opened up about it, it would get back to my parents, which would then just get back to me being screamed and yelled at for hours on end behind closed doors. And I didn't want to go through that. So I would try to hide myself as much as possible while also trying to be out and open as much as possible. And that gave me a lot of anxiety. It gave me a lot of depression. And I also have PTSD from my childhood of constantly living in fear. I would constantly have to tell people, oh, you can't call me Dominic at home. Don't call me Lauren, because I didn't like that name at all back at that period of time. And so it made it awkward. I didn't want to bring my friends around my parents. I didn't feel that I had anyone to talk to either, because if someone was concerned for my well-being, I was a minor and it got back to my family. So by the time I was able to transition, I had been denied access to adequate healthcare. So I didn't really see a therapist who was comfortable with like working with transgender individuals. He had worked with one person prior to me, and they were an adult, not a minor. And it didn't really do much benefit for me, because my parents had put me in it with the intention of changing me, and I obviously didn't change. And so they felt that he wasn't doing a good job. So they took me out of therapy. And then when I got to college, I had a really horrible mental breakdown, because I was threatened with losing financial support with attending college or starting my transition, and kind of losing ties with my family. And so I decided that I was going to try to do college and have some financial support outside of the loans that I needed to take out with my family. However, that lasted one semester, and I was extremely uncomfortable, and I realized that I wanted to transition. And so when I transitioned, I told my family that I had started to medically transition and legally changed my name and gender. And that same night, they told me I needed to move out of their house, and they didn't want to see me again when they came back from work the next day. So I was 18 years old at that point, trying to figure out not only how to transition on my own and how to navigate the legal sphere of that as well on my own, change all my documents as well. But now I had this added stress of figuring out what I was going to do with my life, how I was going to sustain myself. As we were talking about earlier before we started the conversation, California is a very expensive place to live. I grew up in the wealthiest county in California as well, which was difficult because I was not within the 1% of the 1% that lived in this county. My family was the individuals who were serving these individuals, right? And I went to school with a lot of these people as well. So I was almost the odd one out. My friends would have backpacks that were like $1,000, and my backpack was like $25 from Tilly's. So like I just give that as kind of this, paint the picture for what the environment was like that I was in. It was really interesting to like process that and understand how it affected my mental health. Like I realized that I was struggling so much to try to keep up, and that finances were being used against me to try to get me to not pursue medical transition. And it put a hindrance on getting access to adequate mental health care. I didn't ever have adequate mental health care. I got some help here and there from different therapists, but it was never enough. And eventually I found myself in college, again, struggling with these suicidal ideations, but actually acting upon them, and struggling with the changes of testosterone in my body and not feeling that I had any sort of support network around me. And I was struggling with trying to just finish college and just be a young adult.
Yeah.
And so I really lost myself. I really went into deep, dark places. And so I had to get myself out of that on my own, because I realized that I wasn't getting any help from the medical industrial complex, whatever you want to call it, because it was like my gender therapy wasn't talking to my mental health therapy. And it was like these two spheres that weren't talking to each other. And so I basically told myself that I needed to figure out how to be okay with being alive. And I basically took it into my own hands. And that's when I started to pause. And I wanted to come off of all of my medication, not because I don't think medication is helpful. I think it's very helpful, but I think when you're over medicated, it's not helpful. And it's hard to get back to your base state, as I call it, my own base state, and know what is actually helping me and what isn't helping me.
Yeah.
Because at one point I was on 5 different psychiatric medications, a hormone blocker, and testosterone. So it was an anxiety, antidepressant, a mood stabilizer, antipsychotic, and an antineurotic.
That's
How was I supposed to have a good sense of
pill.
yeah, how was I supposed to have a good sense of self, right?
No wonder
And
you made it out with all that.
yeah, I know, right? Like it was a constant battle, right? And every time I would talk to a therapist about it, I would just feel like they were giving me a surface level answer. And so it started to turn spiritual. I mean, I was like, there's nothing else that I haven't dove into besides spirituality, and really trying to figure out what is my purpose on earth. Why am I here? Why did I go through all of this? Why is my life so seemingly harder compared to my friends? Not that we should compare our lives, but that's how I felt at the time. I was seeing, again, living in this wealthy county, a lot of my friends had their college completely paid for. I didn't. And I was also not supported by my family in regards to my transition. Most of my friends were. I really found myself in this jealous and bitter state, and I didn't want to be like that because it wasn't anyone else's fault that I was in this position.
Yeah.
And I needed to be okay with people living their lives and taking advantage of the privileges that they have, and also acknowledging the privileges that I had, and not being so bitter and like jealous of a person. And I just decided to delete all of my social media, and that was back in 2018, and just really hone in on who I was on a soul level and detach from any sort of identity that I may have held, whether it had been my mental health diagnoses or my trans identity or my queer identity. I just let go of all of it. And I wanted to go back to myself as I was when I was a child, where I felt I was more just innately me, not trying to tailor myself to be palatable for someone else. And that really started this whole journey and this whole mental health, just kind of, I guess that's a journey as well, but this just mental health healing and really diving deep. And I really had to figure out how to work with my brain and how to work with this emotional capacity that I had to feel like the lowest of lows, but the highest of highs, and how to own that and harness that, because it's energy and everything in life is energy. So I had to really learn how to work with my own energy, my own capabilities. And it really became helpful for me to use plant medicine, mushrooms, particularly ayahuasca, DMT, and going into it in ceremony with shamans who have been trained in this, who had like invited me because they saw how much it had helped me, but also the abilities that I had to help other people and do that work. And I've really stepped into that now, finally, because I feel much more grounded, much more aware of my sense of self. And I, of course, still will feel what may be perceived as negative emotions, but I can work with them now. It doesn't debilitate me from doing everything else in my life, and just showing up authentically as myself, regardless of if most people don't understand it or agree with it. And I really started to see that when I came off of hormones, and a ton of people around me were like, well, you're not trans, then you're not transgender. Why?
I don't believe that.
Yeah,
Depends whether you're on hormones or not. It's just all about you. But
exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's kind of
I
funny.
mean, it's just a tool to help us express ourselves. It's not the be all end all of like what makes you trans.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny that you bring up dosing, because a lot of people don't agree with microdosing. They don't agree with anything like that. But it's always interesting. So I do want my viewers to know that we believe that everybody has a right to their own journey, number one, first and foremost. But before you make a judgment step, please understand that our United States government is actually looking into microdosing to help people with disabilities, including schizophrenia, and have been proven to show actually helping rewire the brain to those people to have them live complete and full lives. So before you jump on the bandwagon and start yelling at us about this, please understand there's research. Go research it. All right. All right, go ahead.
A ton of research coming out and
ton of research on it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually fascinating. I mean, I kind of like grew up like you thinking I was like, it was tomboy, all that type of fun stuff and interesting too. The only difference is my parents, well, my dad is oddly supportive. Which is so weird. He's like super excited. He's like,
that's awesome.
Told him something new. He's like, awesome, cool. He's like, hey, tell everybody my kid's a lesbian. And now he's like, everybody, I have a son daughter now. And I'm like, it's a son, just not son daughter.
Son daughter.
It's confusing for him, but I mean, he's single dad. What can you do?
Sounds like he's trying though. That's good.
He's trying to do the best he could. I mean, he has his own problems and stuff too. Don't get me wrong. That's a whole another topic. But I mean, I want to ask now because if I'm not mistaken, you did talk about you're going back on hormones. Is that correct? So
yeah, I've been back on T for 2 months now.
2 months now. And how is your support system now?
So it's way better. I think I really realized how much that had affected me in the beginning of starting T. Granted, too, when I first started testosterone, I had this kind of freak incident where the pharmacy that I was getting the testosterone from, my first vial ever, compounded it wrong and put estradiol in the bottle of testosterone. Ooh. So I was unknowingly introducing super high levels of estradiol into my body and had a really horrible start to my first transition experience, which I had also just been kicked out of my house too. So comparing it to that, I think anything would be better than that because my periods were like, they went from 3 days was the normal range to when I was on that vial, like 11 to 12 days. And I told my endocrinologist that I was having these issues and I was just faced with, oh, well, testosterone can do weird things to your body. So I think having that experience,
it doesn't do that.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I think doing that experience, having that experience, and also like having the experience I did with the other communities in regards to my mental health, it really made me be like, there needs to be more research. Like I also need to look into this a lot more for myself and really understand like, what am I getting myself into exactly? And how much of this do I actually need for myself? And so that's why I initially came off of testosterone, was because I also realized too that I was feeling guilt and shame for wanting to be on it because of all of the horrible things that had been said to me as a child when I had been asking for it and wanting to get on it. So it was a combination of those two. And I also had been experiencing hair loss, but I realized that was more connected to my diet at the time. I had a really horrible relationship with food that I just started to really rebuild. I had disordered eating for the past like 8 years, like very, very, very restrictive eating patterns and not healthy. So I realized that also a lot of that was connected to my mental health stuff and also my just body not having enough nutrients, and that also contributing to my mental health. So it was just this intertwined combination of, okay, what is actually like, is it the testosterone? Is it the food? Is it just my mental health? What is it? So I had to come off of everything, I personally feel, to really navigate all of that. So when I started to see an improvement in my hair, not having been off of testosterone for a year, but having changed my diet, I realized, oh, okay, it actually wasn't all testosterone's fault. I was blaming testosterone a lot of the time because I was told as a young child, testosterone is going to harm you. You are going to shorten your life. And this is not healthy. You are not being healthy. So anything that I perceived as not being a good sign of health, I automatically said it's testosterone, which was a cognitive distortion that I internalized.
It's crazy that you bring that up because I actually, so I know a lot of people who are older and that have transitioned, and they have this mindset that like, oh, I'm 50, I'm trans, I'm not going to live much longer. And I'm like, excuse me? What do you mean
Yeah.
you're not going to live much longer? And they're like, oh yeah, trans people, don't live that long. And I was like, that's because we're told that, so we embody it and we live it. Whereas what we do with kind of something like what you do, it's like I call it the holistic approach, where it's you take everything as a whole, not just holistic, woo woo, or everybody calls it woo woo. Like God thinks I'm the woo woo person, but I will put them in their place. But I'm still woo woo apparently. But so
I'm
I
with you in some
yeah, I
way.
like to think of it as and don't get me wrong, I still have I have like my Sour Patch Kids behind me. um, I have my days where I don't take care of myself holistically. And it is about taking care because like everybody's like, oh, you're gonna go bald. Like, no, my hair got thicker, but I also take pretty good care of myself when it comes to nutrition for the most part. I mean, I gotta get back onto it, as and everybody can hear I'm sick. And then also, working out, that's great for your mental health. Like, I'm not sitting there saying everybody who goes on testosterone needs to go doing what I do, which is like 5Ks and stuff like that. No, that's just my personal brand ever since I got my top surgery. Go for walks, stuff like that, get out in nature, disconnect, things like that. Like what you did is the correct approach. And that's why I'm starting to get back into doing the podcast. I did have to take a mental health break because exactly what I was going through. I feel like it's like you were feeling a lot of emotions, and it's kind of hard to keep up with something when you're having trouble, connecting with your own self, and you're like, I'm trying to do this, but I don't have the energy to do this, and I'm just like stuck in a hard place. Plus, I'm in Massachusetts and it's winter, and seasonal depression hits me hard. So, like, I understand like needing to take a break from things. I completely understand that and respect that wholeheartedly. And I love that your support system is a lot better now. I think that is definitely what everybody needs. And I think you went about it the right way. You took care of yourself first. You took a step back. You did the research, which is what I try to tell everybody to do, is the research. And if somebody doesn't like doing research, just tell me. I'll help you do the research.
Yeah.
This podcast is about. It's about educating people that every single one of us in our stories are different. And Dominic, I'm like what you're talking about is extremely important because you didn't have the support. You lost support in college, and that is something that the people don't understand. It's really hard to prove that you're estranged from your family to FAFSA. It's extremely hard. You could do it, but it's extremely hard. So you had to go through all that, navigating that by yourself. I mean, were you able to finish college? Did you ever, or was it hard for you? Or you still were in that process? Because I actually had to wait as an adult, like further on, like really adult.
For me, I actually had lost support even earlier in regards to just emotional support from my family. By the time I was, I want to say 11, 12, I had already realized that I was pretty independent and on my own. So I, I just kept like going with what I was feeling called to do and be, right? And when we're talking about too, like creating this support system, it was me just having to live my life unapologetically, and whoever wanted to be in that, I would have them in my life.
Yeah.
I'm really thankful that I have a partner now who can mirror my feelings as well. And with him,
absolutely adorable, by the way.
thank you. Yeah. I love him so much. And with him being older than me too, I could see the time period that he grew up in. He's 22 years older than me, and he had to face a lot of similar, I would say, themes in life that I had to go through, but in a different era. And he was someone as well that helped me learn how to forgive people that hurt me without actually having them say sorry to me. Because he was also kicked out of his house and lost financial support around the same age when he came out as gay. And that really inspired me to start working on forgiving people, to really just let go of the hurt and the pain that I was holding on to and and blaming people for my symptoms of my PTSD or whatever, because I could tell you why, right? But it doesn't help me not get triggered or activated by the people that hurt me, or in situations that reminded me of the situations that hurt me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long process for sure. And
I will say we here at Transforming with Drew support age gap love. We think it's actually beautiful. So just gonna put that note for anybody who's not into that stuff. Leave it alone. Move on. Right? Love is love. Just leave it alone.
As long as you're consenting adults.
Adorable. Exactly.
Yeah. As long as you're consenting adults, what I do in my private life doesn't affect you, know, and what helped me realize that was actually my transition experience. Was I lost so much more when I transitioned that I didn't really care if I was going to lose other people because of my relationship. And actually, he's helped me get closer to my family because they like him and they want to get to know him. And that's helped me open up more to creating new relationships with my family now that I feel that I'm more autonomous, because I'm completely independent and on my own now. And, going back to the school thing as well, I finished when I was 21, and I finished in 3 years instead of 4 because I was really ambitious, I guess. And consistently did school for 3 years, like during the summer as well, because I, one, felt stuck in the education system. I felt that I had to get a degree.
Yeah.
And I wish I just stopped, because I realized that everything I wanted to do, I didn't necessarily need to get it through my degree. But I'm also thankful for the experience. I think higher education is something we should all have access to. That's a whole other topic that we could talk about.
Talk about that all day long.
Yeah, me too. But I did finish, but I was struggling. I was in and out of psychiatric rehabilitation programs, and I was also doing a rehab program while also trying to finish school. So it was really difficult, because at the same time I was dealing with side effects from my psychiatric medications. I mean, I would black out because of the medication. Like, I would just have periods of time that I didn't remember, or I would fall asleep somewhere in my dorm and I would wake up in a different place and I had no memory of it. And people would tell me
that's insane
that we had full-on conversations with them and I didn't remember. And that was when I realized something was deeply wrong and I needed to finish. But I also had this drive in me to not let like my schooling or life stop because of my mental illness. I never wanted to let it define me. I never wanted to be a victim of my symptoms. I wanted to conquer them and also finish school. So when I finished school, I then was able to take some time off to work on myself. I was supposed to go to China as well for grad school. And so I did have a plan to continue my schooling. And then we had the pandemic, which that stopped me from doing it.
I mean, I understand like we were talking about earlier, the pandemic has been good and bad for some people, for sure. I definitely want to say that. So you said that your relationship with your family is getting a little bit better, though. Is what I'm gonna hear. That's really
yeah. I mean, it's nice now that I have my own life, so I can have a relationship with them on my own terms. It doesn't feel like this power dynamic anymore of, oh, if I'm vulnerable with you about how I'm feeling, I may lose certain privileges in life just because I told you that I went by the name Dominic at my first job. Things like that would happen to me. Like, I got my first job, I went by Dominic, they took my car away. It just not so great fun things to go through.
No, I definitely can understand that. And I'm really, really grateful that you were able to share this story with us and this journey with us. And I kind of can't wait to watch you grow. And I want other people to be able to watch you grow. So now that you're back on social media, how are people going to be able to find you?
So I am on TikTok at It's Dominic Lauren. I'm also on YouTube. Dominic Lauren is just the name of my YouTube. And then I'm also on Instagram, the same at It's Dominic Lauren. And then I'm about to start a spiritual like couples account as well on TikTok with my partner, just because he is very, very knowledgeable. He's been studying this for many, many decades, and he holds an indigenous like shaman lineage that he and I both have been studying together, and we're about to really want to step out into the world and kind of do this work together. And that's a lot of stuff that I'm passionate about as well. And I think the world is kind of opening up to that. I think we're seeing that shift right now, just in consciousness or in our day-to-day lives. Like,
Yes.
people are really starting to understand, for example, like microdosing, as you said, there's a lot of scientific basis behind it. And that is something I feel really passionate about, but also my trans thing. So I want to leave, the It's Dominic Lauren account as my trans soul just journey account, but then also have this other facet of myself, which is a huge part of my life, which is my spirituality and my psychic gifts that I want to help offer to people and really help people step into who they really feel they are and not be ashamed of just owning that for fear of losing something in their life. Because I feel that I've gone through a lot, and I can offer a lot to teach people, just being grounded in themselves and trusting themselves. I think we live in a world that makes us not feel that we can trust ourselves, and I want to remind everyone that we have a unique path. Even if we may seem similar to other people, we are our own individual self, and that's all into itself beautiful.
I love that. And I will make sure to put all the information in the show notes so people can copy and paste it as well. If you were to have advice for anybody who is struggling with their transition, what would the most important advice you think you could give them?
I would say, don't let the struggle take away from being present in your day-to-day life, because unfortunately the society that we live in right now is still very closed off to gender nonconformity and allowing it to kind of move elegantly throughout society. It's not your own individual struggle. It's something that collectively a lot of other people are struggling with. And to remember that you're not alone in that, because it can feel very lonely, and to reach out and have conversation and build community with individuals, not just because you're trans, but because you genuinely get along with each other and you also happen to be transgender. I think that's the most important point to remember, and to also know that struggling is a good sign that you are on the right track into figuring yourself out. Because if you had all the answers, life would be extremely boring and you wouldn't really have growth. I mean, that's part of it. The struggle is to give you the growth, and it's going to make you into a better person. And when you look back in your life, you're going to realize that all the struggles that you've gone through to get you to right here, right now, were worth it. And it will always be worth it. And that there's ways to help yourself get out of any negative route or rut that you may find yourself in, because there are people who have gone through similar experiences who are talking about it. And if they can do it, you can do it as well. As cheesy as that may sound, it's very true.
No, I completely agree. That's always been my mindset. If the why is strong enough, then the how just happens to fall in your lap. So I agree with that 100%. Well, I do want to thank you again, and everybody, please remember to live with purpose and live your truth.
Thank you for listening to Transforming with Us. You can like, follow, and share on all major platforms to keep up with all things trans and queer.
You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Apple Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more.